Hello everyone, Jana Liebarger here. I will apologize because I'm actually quite tired. We had a massive truck at work today that had to be pulled out this morning. We're getting closer and closer to peak season, which is the holiday season pretty much. So I do apologize if I seem a bit out of it today, but I decided to start off my Afterthoughts series, pretty much discussing a bit of a discrepancy that some people have a problem with in Final Fantasy VII's compilation, mainly to deal with Crisis Core. Some people I've seen complain about the fact that Genesis was actually mostly responsible for Sephiroth's fall. Sephiroth didn't fall on his own in the flashbacks that you see in the original 7. I would have to contend that Genesis's involvement doesn't really change anything. The reason why is because the original 7, and whenever we see those memories in the original 7, we're seeing things as Cloud was thinking, thought that he saw. The reason why Cloud didn't really remember Genesis was, aside from the fact that in the real world, Genesis as a character didn't exist yet. But within the universe, Cloud had no reason to suspect that Genesis was involved, and with his memory getting mucked up the way it did during his 4 years in the Nibelheim mansion, the Shinra mansion in Nibelheim, it would make perfect sense for Cloud's memories to have been compromised so much that he would not remember a man in red leather like Genesis. So, personally, I like the fact that Genesis was somewhat responsible for Sephiroth's fall, because sometimes you don't have to take a fall from grace by yourself. Sometimes you just need that push. And from the characterization that Sephiroth has in Crisis Core, he sounds to be too mentally sure to fall on his own, even with the doubts that he started getting as he read through the records in the mansion. So I'm thinking that having Genesis give him that final push just makes it a lot better. And even though Genesis and Angeal sort of take away a bit from Sephiroth's uniqueness with his wing, I don't really mind that so much, because when you're looking at scientific experiments, they're not doing it on just one test subject. So it's actually a bit better that they did it on 3. I really like Genesis as a character. And it's not just because in the original Japanese he was voiced by Gact and was based on Gact himself either. I just like Genesis because he adds a new aspect to the story. And I'm not entirely sure if there's going to be any future Final Fantasy VII games for the compilation that details why he woke up, for what reason he woke up at the end of Dirge of Cerberus, because that was just a preview for Crisis Core, introducing us to a character that would appear in Crisis Core. There's really the discrepancy between Cloud's memories and Crisis Core are, like I said, pretty easily explained. His memory was very, very messed up thanks to Hojo's experiments. Since this is going to be an Afterthoughts video about Final Fantasy VII in general, I'm probably going to talk a bit about probably some of the reasons why I really enjoy the game. And thanks to me being somewhat of a newer fan compared to those who have played it at its initial release in 1997, I joined very late to the fandom. So you can't really accuse me of jumping on the hype train or jumping on the bandwagon for that matter, because I became a fan for the game's own merit. I never owned the PS2, the PlayStation release, but I do have the game on my PSP. A lot of the ideas from Final Fantasy VII, mainly just the story itself, the setting especially. We're looking at a world that has been highly industrialized, so it's definitely a lot like our own, and it also gave it a different feel compared to Final Fantasies 1 to 5. No, 1 to 6, 6 had some industrialization with their magitechs and such, but it still was more of a fantasy setting, whereas Final Fantasy VII is a bit more industrialized. It's basically a lot like ours. Their reliance on Mako energy is a lot like our dependence on oil and such, and it's almost kind of funny how in Advent Children that instead of being dependent on Mako, they were drilling for oil. So there's another parallel right there. The planet's gonna end up turning into a lot sort of like an XP of Earth in a sense. Aside from the characters that I mentioned before, the ones that I really like Tifa, Cloud, Aerith, Sephiroth, another character I really like is Rufus Shinra. I actually have some of the Play Arts figures for Final Fantasy VII. Aside from Advent Children Sephiroth and Crisis Core Aerith, I also have one of their newest Final Fantasy VII figures, which is Rufus. I've loved Rufus since Advent Children. For some reason, he's just so freaking awesome. Wally Wingert did a very good job voicing him, and since playing the original game, I've actually seen how far Rufus has come since the original game. In the original, he was power hungry. I had read that during the events actually of Before Crisis, which was the mobile game that was only released in Japan and centered on the Turks, Rufus apparently was funding the first iteration of Avalanche, and he was caught. But his father ended up exiling him, in a sense, to Junon. So when Rufus appears in Final Fantasy VII, he is actually returning from his exile upon his father's death at the hands of Jenova in Sephiroth's form. And we see that he is indeed very power hungry. He wants to control the world through fear, unlike his father who wanted to control it through money. And after his near-death experience with Diamond Weapon's attack on Midgar, that sort of changed his tune pretty quickly. He then became an advocate for healing the planet after all the damage that his company caused. But he did so quietly by funding the World Regenesis Organization. Like I said, I'm very tired. Which is headed by Reeve Twesty, another character I pretty much adore. He doesn't have a whole lot of involvement in the original Final Fantasy VII, but the greater focus on him in Dirge of Cerberus and his interactions with Vincent Valentine, along with being voiced by Crispin Freeman, really made me a huge fan of Reeve. I just adore Reeve. I had originally wanted to do another three stories for Final Fantasy VII before it pretty much ended up getting canned, except for one story, which was going to focus on Reeve, but it never happened. When I started writing it, somehow the story that I was writing to follow Genesis ended up getting copied over the original Reeve story, but both those stories were canceled. Like, the only one that I even kept was one that focuses on Rufus and my OC, Evangeline O'Reilly. But I haven't worked on that in quite a while, and it's probably likely not going to get done. I did have a huge burst of inspiration once that turned into about 20 pages of text. I'd have to write a bridge to bridge it between that and the first part of the narrative, which is already up on my DeviantArt page. Link will be in the description. Crisis Core is probably my favorite game, and for pretty much many of the same reasons as everybody else who liked it. It's the fact that we're playing as Zack, we're pretty much playing his life. I liked his relationship with Angeal. It was a very good mentor dynamic that they had going on. And I really felt for Angeal, because when he found that he had wings himself, he just wondered if that made him a monster. And Zack almost agreed with him in a sense, but it's really thanks to Cisne that he had a better idea, and he really wanted to help Angeal come to the conclusion that just because you have wings, it doesn't make you any less human than the rest of us. I liked the interactions between Sephiroth, Genesis, and Angeal. In fact, that fight scene, that full-on CGI fight scene, was probably one of the best things I have ever seen. It pretty much left a lot of Advent Children behind in terms of how awesome it was. That's pretty much, that cutscene also gives you an idea about who Genesis himself was. Probably one of the cool things that I liked about Genesis in regards to his wing is that it had two carpal joints. It had two wrist joints, and like the carpal joints in your wrist or a bird's wing. That just gave it an overall more mutated, or mutated is probably like the best word, but more of a mutated look compared to the rather natural looking wing that Sephiroth has. And Angeal having wings in white, with two wings on one side, with one being smaller than the other, but they're also a bit shorter than what you'd expect a bird's wing to be. So their entire dynamic is pretty interesting, especially when set against the book that's mentioned in Universe called Loveless. Because it really does make sense. It really fits those three pretty well. Another thing that I really liked about Crisis Core was Sephiroth's characterization. We get to see him before he became the crazy madman from the original game, who wanted to bring Meteor down to wound the planet so greatly that the life stream would have to get involved just to heal it. I know he was yet another villain who wanted to become a god, and even though he didn't succeed, he almost did. I just remembered the somewhat of a, probably not really a controversy, it's probably not big enough for that, but the disagreement, I guess, about how much was Jenova or Sephiroth in control throughout the original game. I would have to contend that Sephiroth was always in control. We don't know exactly how alive Jenova was by the time of Final Fantasy VII, but I would like to think that Sephiroth's will was much stronger than hers was at the time, because she had been sealed away for over 2,000 years by the Cetra, where, like I said, we're not entirely sure just how aware she is of how much time has passed, or the world around her. But one thing is definitely for sure, that up until we come across Sephiroth's original body in the Northern Crater, the figure that we've been running into is Genova, that Sephiroth is forcing to take his form. So, I guess in a sense, both Sephiroth and Genova are responsible for Aerith's death. I really wouldn't pin it on one of them or the other. If I had to pick, it would probably have to be fully on Sephiroth, because like I said before, we just don't know how aware or active Genova was, aside from Sephiroth imposing his will, making her body do his will. Let me see. What other things do I like? With Advent Children, I liked the interactions between Reno and Rude. Reno especially was hilarious, especially when he was being voiced by Quentin Flynn. I'm glad he's always come back to that role. I want to, now that I'm thinking about it, I actually want to talk a bit about Lucrezia Crescent, who is Sephiroth's mother. A lot of people don't like her because of her involvement with Sephiroth and how things turned out eventually, but we gotta remember that Lucrezia is easily the most human character in the entire compilation. The reason why is because she is relatively weak-willed. Not everybody is as willfully strong as you would like. She is sort of like a check against the other characters who possess very strong wills. I pretty much pin everything that happened in the compilation on Hojo and Hojo only, because he is a complete monster. It would make perfect sense for him to feed on Lucrezia's guilt for the death of Vincent's father, Grimoire, but he was the one who started it. She was just a pawn, whether willingly or unwillingly. She let the guilt finally get to her, and she sealed herself away in a crystal, because the Genova cells that were injected in her into Sephiroth while he was in the womb kept her from knowing peace in death. So being encased in crystal was really the best she could do. I just can't hate on Lucrezia for anything that's happened to Vincent or to Sephiroth, because the truth is that it's all on Hojo. I consider Hojo to be the main villain of Final Fantasy VII. Sephiroth probably would not. He is the main antagonist, Sephiroth is, but there can be a difference between villain and antagonist. And the villain role has to go to Hojo, because he was the one who did all this. So whether you like Lucrezia or not is really all up to you. Everybody has their reasons for why they like or don't like her, but I just like her because her suffering it's just so obvious to me, especially because we have men and women in the real world who suffer almost exactly as she did. And do we think of them any less? I should hope not. So why should we judge someone like Lucrezia for something that she just didn't know what she was doing? A lot of people would like to think that she should have been a lot smarter, but again, she was dealing with lots of guilt over falling in love with Vincent, even though she inadvertently got Grimoire killed. Anybody can suffer from that. Not every character is strong, not every character is above it all, not everybody can shake something like that off so easily. And if you can, then I don't know exactly what you're made of, but most of us mere mortals would probably do exactly as she did. And because I find Hojo to be a master manipulator, it makes perfect sense that she did the things that she did. But I don't hold her responsible for anything that's happened, because it really is all on Hojo. He did it all for the evils, and he did it for the science. But he has absolutely no morals. He's just a complete monster mad scientist. I've been going on for at least 20 minutes, so I'm probably going to end this right about now, but I'm probably going to end up following up pretty quickly with another video on the heels of this one, because I wanted to talk about Skyrim, why I'm a Stormcloak, what I really liked about Skyrim, my favorite characters and all that such. And when I get on fire for something, I don't want to just quit. This is why I haven't really nailed down a uploading schedule yet. And it's probably better for my videos to be spontaneous, even if I do multiple uploads a day, because nothing that I'm doing for this will be scripted. I'm just talking off the top of my head. Probably the reason why I don't want to do scripted shows like the Brony Notion or Silver Quill, two of my favorite Brony analysts, is simply because I just don't have the time or the desire to really write out a script. If I did start to write one, I would end up getting sidetracked by something else, because that is that's pretty much the entire reason why I was diagnosed with ADHD. I have focusing issues. So, like I said before, this will just be me chatting with everything. So, yeah, that's about it. I will be putting another link to my DeviantArt page in the description. I'm probably going to try to make that a habit, because not everybody is going to be with me from the very beginning. So it would be kind of nice for everybody to come to any one of my videos and see the link there. So I will have that link, and I will see you in a little bit with an Afterthoughts journal on Skyrim. So this is Jenna signing out. Until next time.